So this new topic is on decomposition and entomology. It ties into our last chapter on death. It unfortunately is a little dark still, and there are some gruesome pictures in here, so I just warn you if you're a little squeamish, but I try to make it as light and quick as possible. So first off, what is decomposition, which we also refer to as decomp? Basically, decomposition is a breakdown of living or once living material by other living organisms. And decomposition occurs fastest given normal conditions between 70 and 99 degrees Fahrenheit, so a relatively warm to very warm temperature. Putrefaction is similar to decomposition. It's the destruction of soft tissue, but it is because of bacteria. And the bacteria comes from the intestines and so forth, and it basically causes a release of gas and fluids. And you'll learn soon enough that this occurs in the second stage of decomposition. So putrefaction is a effect or a what's the word I'm looking for? Decomposition causes putrefaction because of bacteria present. I'll say it that way. Okay, so factors that can affect decomposition. There's many different factors that can affect decomposition, but the age of a person can affect decomp. Someone younger will actually decompose faster than an elderly person, which is usually opposite of what people think. Weight. More obese people or animals decompose faster. Clothing, if you're wrapped up in many layers or in fabric, that's going to slow down decomposition because less of your body is actually exposed to the elements. Health can affect the rate of decomposition, specifically diseases. The ambient temperature, which is the environment or the surrounding temperature, can affect decomposition. Higher temperatures will cause decomp to happen quicker, and it will cause the body to dry out faster, whereas cooler temperatures will slow down decomposition. And then just the environment in general. Is it sunny, windy, snowing, raining, whatever it may be? Decomposition happens faster in air. So as I said, if you're covered up, it may be warmer inside, but you're not exposed to the elements as much. Decomposition slows down with a body that's buried because it's not exposed to air, or if a body is in water, decomposition slows down, which, like I said, is opposite of what a lot of people think, because when you see on crime shows, or especially crime dramas and movies, obviously if you wrap someone up, they're going to be gross when you unwrap them, or if they're in water, they're all bloated, which is all true, but it doesn't necessarily mean it speeds up the rate of decomp. So there are 5 stages of decomp, and each picture I have for the stages is of a pig. These pigs were donated to science. They died of natural causes. They were not killed for this research. So our stage 0 of decomp, if you will, is obviously a living creature. It's alive and well. Stage 1 of decomp is called fresh. This is 1 to 2 days after death. The pH of your body starts to lower and the cells start to break down because you don't have oxygen and blood flow occurring anymore. These are when your mortises start to occur, so you have liver, rigor, and alba mortis. And you should know by now those start occurring at different rates. The body temperature is going to drop because that is what alba mortis says happens. Usually the face becomes discolored first, just because your skin is thin and there's lots of vessels very close to the surface, no fat. And then flies are going to show up almost immediately, and they look for any open orifices like the eye sockets, the nose, the mouth, things like that. Okay, stage 2 is called bloat. So bloat starts to happen 2 to 5 days after death, given normal circumstances. This, like I said, is when putrefaction occurs. You start to have the bacteria in the intestines do their thing because they're still living, and it starts this process of basically eating away at the body from the inside out, if you will. The insects are on the outside, going in, the bacteria is on the inside. So usually the abdominal cavity will start to swell with carbon dioxide. If you've ever seen roadkill, especially in the warmer summer months, a lot of times they're bloated. This is why. So the bacteria in the intestines start to eat away at the intestines open, the gas releases, it has nowhere to go but into the abdominal area, and it causes the abdomen to swell. It can cause the abdomen to burst, or if someone pokes it or it's punctured. This isn't exactly the same situation, but if you hunt and you've gutted a deer and you've hit the abdomen area in a wrong way, you can cause a release of gas, which smells. The face is also going to begin to swell. You start to get what we call marbling occurring on the skin, and you get the veins starting to show through the skin, reddish, and then they begin to turn blackish, greenish because the blood stops flowing. You can notice on both of these pictures of the bodies, that blackish, greenish color starting to show. You may have fluids that start to leak out through various orifices, or like I said, the cavity has burst. And then there's definitely a strong odor present because the insect activity has increased, and that is causing the decomp to continue. All right, stage 3 is called active decay. Active is the key word here. This is about 5 to 10 days after death. You're going to continue to have some bloating occurring with the CO2 being released from the intestines. If the cavity or abdominal wall does burst, you may not have as much bloating because it's being released into the atmosphere. It doesn't always occur, but like I said, it is possible that the abdominal cavity and the chest cavity can actually burst. So it'll start to collapse after that because there's nothing holding that body open or blown up, if you will. Soft tissue begins to liquefy because of the cell breakdown. The skin sloughs off or falls off. So you can see in this picture of the pig, the skin has started to peel away because it's been stretched from the bloat, and it's not living anymore, so it begins to fall off. This is also when most of the body mass loss occurs towards the 10-day mark because, as I said, active is the key word here, and there's a large, high number of insect activity going on. So the insects are actually eating away at the flesh, so you lose a lot of body mass towards the end of this stage of decay. And there's a very, very, very strong odor. If you ever smelled roadkill or something like that, you know that death smell. That's because of all this decomposition happening, all the breaking down of cells and skin and fat and tissue. So, as I said before, you don't need to write these down, but just a fun fact, due to the skin slippage that occurs in the active stage of decomp, it is still possible to actually obtain a fingerprint from someone who is decomposing. Basically, what they do is they take the skin off of the finger. It's kind of falling off anyway, and they place that skin over someone else's hand that has a glove on, and they fingerprint that way. So sometimes if active decay is happening, you can't necessarily fingerprint someone. The early stages of decomp, you still could. Once that skin starts to fall off, they actually just take the skin and wear it, if you will, on a gloved hand, which makes his fingerprinting process easier. Fun facts. Also, the fluids and gases that are released during composition from a body are toxic to plants. And if you've ever seen a decomposing anything or just in the pictures, the plants and the grass and the ground around the area are usually black. The plants actually start to die as well. Okay, stage 4 is advanced decay. This is 10 to 24 days after death, depending on conditions. Basically what happens is the body starts to dry itself and preserve itself. This is where you can have some mummification happening depending on the situation and the environment. Most of the flesh is gone due to the insect activity. Unfortunately, if you have someone left in the wilderness, it is possible too that scavengers and carnivores may be eating off the body, but the insects actually do clean off the bones pretty well. There's usually not much left behind. Because there's not as much flesh left behind, the odor is going to lessen and there's not going to be many insects remaining because they have nothing to feed off of. You also have adipocere occurring, which basically is when you have this waxed layer that forms on the skin. I'm pretty sure that's what the point of House of Wax, the horror movie, is about. I could be wrong. I don't like scary movies, but I would assume. So you have this waxy looking layer that forms on skin during this stage as well. And then the last stage is called the dry stage. It's usually 25 days or more after death, and decomp can take weeks to months to years. It just depends on the situation. So at this point, there's mostly just dry remains of bones left. As I said, this can take weeks to years to complete, depending on the climate. If someone's buried in a casket versus left outside, versus, shallow grave, just covered up in water, whatever it may be. Another just interesting fact or rule of thumb is called Casper's law. So according to Casper's law, the amount of decomposition that would take 1 week in air would take 2 weeks in water, and approximately 8 weeks if buried. So when you're talking about a buried body, especially in our modern day caskets, this decomposition will take much, much longer. That's why they're able to actually exhume and dig up bodies if they need to go back and do another autopsy or follow-up investigation. Decomp does not happen as quickly when you're buried below ground, especially in modern day caskets, because it's well contained and you don't have these environmental issues like air and so forth affecting you. Decomposition does also not affect your hair or fingernail growth. So they do still continue to grow slightly after death, but it will stop. But it doesn't affect the length. So whatever time you die, the length of your hair, the fingernail length will stay the same until the hair eventually falls off. Okay, and then the last topic, which kind of relates all the other topics together, is called entomology. Entomology is the study of insects to aid in the investigation of death, investigations of abuse, or just neglect cases. This, once again, just like rigor, algar, and livor mortis, are just used to predict time of death. You kind of have to take everything together to really get a picture of an estimated time of death that's pretty accurate. So just real quick, I'm not an expert in entomology. I just want to show you some of the different stages. So the first stage of entomology is with decomp in the fresh stage. This is when you're going to have blowflies coming to the body almost immediately after death, and then yellow jackets eventually start to show up as well to feed off of the blowfly larva. During the bloat state of decomp, you have more activity of insects, so you have other species of flies. You now have maggots because the flies have laid eggs, and then you may also have some beetles showing up. During active decay, you're going to have lots of insect activity, lots of flies and lots of maggots. Many beetles will show up, and cockroaches may even show up at this point. During the advanced stage of decay, the insect population starts to lessen. You may still have some flies, maybe some smaller insects like fruit flies and gnats, and you may still have some beetles, but not nearly the amount you had during the active decay. And then during the dry stage, it's not so much of an insect buffet, if you will, because there's not really flesh left. It's more of a habitat. So you can find insects like beetles and ants and flies potentially just using this as a habitat. The bones and whatever else may be left. Maybe there's some clothing left over they may be using as a habitat for living or laying eggs or something like that. You may also have some arachnids. Like I said, the blowflies are the most common insect to find at a decomposition site, and they're the easiest to study as well. Usually they appear within the first minutes to hours after death, and then they have a specific life cycle. They like to lay their eggs in the moist and dark areas of the body. So they obviously go to open orifices first, like the eye sockets, mouth, nose, ears. Their eggs will on average hatch within 24 hours, and they release their larvae, which you may also know as maggots. The maggots then grow bigger, and then they turn into pupa, which is kind of like a cocoon, and then you have a new adult blowfly. So you have many generations occurring throughout the stages of decomp. So they're able to not only study the size of these insects, but also the generations of them. So like I said, the egg is about, so the adult blowfly arrives at the body, it lays its eggs, they hatch within about 24 hours, and then you have your 3 larva stages, or what we may call maggots. By about a week, they are late stage maggots. Then they start the pupa phase, which can take anywhere from 10 to 20-ish days, depending on the conditions. And that's when they are in their cocoon. And then they are released from their pupa as an adult, and the cycle just starts over. So that's how you get more and more maggots and insect activity. And because of this life cycle, you also attract other insects that can feed off of these various stages. Just some general things that affect insect development, same kind of idea as decomp. The temperature, the season can affect insect development. You know, if we put a raw chicken outside now into the woods, you would see less insect activity, and it would take longer compared to the summer when the insects are more active. Moisture of the general area and in the air, humidity, the wind, just the time of day. Some insects are more active at night or during the early morning. As I said before, the season, the general exposure to elements. Is it covered up where the insects are protected and dry, or is it left out for other kind of creatures? And then just variations among different insects, different parts of the world. Do you see different types of insects? And even just rural versus a city setup can, you know, say something about the type of environment the person was killed in or left in. So that is the end of this general section. So we did death and what happens during death, and now we just covered decomposition and then entomology, the circle of life.